What is going on, everyone? And today I'm going to be talking about the Instagram horror series, The Uriel Files. The Uriel Files is a series created by Med-Induced Posting, and I want to encourage all of you to go and check them out. I will leave a link in the description. It is a phenomenal series, and I'm only going to cover Arc 1 of this whole series in this video, because I want you to experience the whole thing for yourself, because there's lots of subtle little nuances and jokes that you're not going to get from this video alone. So go check them out. It's a fantastic page, especially if you like things like cosmic horror. Cosmic horror is something that has troubled visual horror media creators for a long time, and that is because the beauty of cosmic horror comes from what you can't see. However, with the simplistic style of the Uriel Files, we are able to experience cosmic horror with all its disturbing details without ruining the capturing of our imagination. Because the scariest thing in the world is something you picture in your own mind. Now I'd like to get into the series itself, but first I'd like to explain how it looks and what it uses to set itself up. So the Uriel Files piggybacks off of a popular meme format known as the Wojak. This is typically just a very rudimentary drawn face stating some kind of thing above their head of what kind of person it is, along with a bunch of details, and it's supposed to be funny. Now lots of these are funny, and so when I first found this page I thought, oh, another Wojak meme page. And if you're on my side of the internet, there's a lot of those. However, this one was different. After I read the first slide, I was like, that wasn't funny. And then I slid over to the next slide, and I noticed the story was developing. The first meme we see is of the hiker. Through the details we're given, we discover that the hiker has recently been broken up with by his girlfriend, and he is now hiking around what is called Lake Uriel, which is a big lake that surrounds a couple of different towns, namely Hark, but we'll get to that in a minute. For now, we're focused on the hiker. His girlfriend dumped him, and now he's off hiking. And he's got this weird convoluted plan to try to appear to like he's going crazy to try to win her back, which will actually turn out to be ironic in the long run. The next panel we see is the Old Diver. The Old Diver is a Uriel native who has lived there for the past 20 years. He's a retired scuba instructor, and he still often dives into the lake as his favorite hobby. We read that the diver is growing cynical towards the increase of tourism into the Uriel Lake area and surrounding towns, saying this place is not what it used to be. Now we come to the tourist. And this is the first example of something that we see a lot throughout this series, and that is that one slide often sets up the next. So the last slide ended with the old diver complaining about tourism. The next slide is the tourists. According to this slide, the tourists are the backbone of the lake town's economy, and even though none of the locals like them, they kind of put up with it because the town is becoming rich. It talks a lot about how the tourists are like on some kind of spiritual journey, and read some BuzzFeed article that Lake Uriel was like the spiritual epicenter of the Northwest. Here we finally get into some of the really subtle and amazing humor of the series. The next slide is the shaman, and the first thing we learned about the shaman is that he's a prolific BuzzFeed author. Like, I don't know if most people caught that when they read that for the first time. I certainly didn't, but rereading this to do this video, that caught me so off guard, and I laughed for quite a while. We learned that the shaman claims to have Native American heritage, even though he's actually German, and that he makes his money selling these little statues that wash up ashore out of the lake. It appears that almost every tourist has one of these statues, and most of the locals as well. Now things start to get a little bit cryptic. The next slide is the Old Forest statue. It seems that this is a known local haunted area, that people claim to feel a weird spiritual presence around the statue, and lots of kids like to dare each other to go up and touch it. Now we get introduced to the mayor. The mayor, we find out, has been winning elections for the last 12 years and oversaw the massive tourism expansion of the lake towns. And from what we know from this slide is that he looks really good in pictures, perhaps a little too good. The slide ends with the phrase, "Actually, you better not stare at him for too long." This is where things start to get a little more confusing and creepy, because of the last two slides we don't really, it's like, whoa, this just went from one thing to another. and all of a sudden you see this kind of horror story developing. And that's what makes this so great, is how subtle it is and how much of a slow burn it really is. So now we move on to Volume 2, and Volume 2 starts off with the Little Lake statues. The Little Lake statues, as you know, are what the shaman is making money selling. What I didn't mention in the last thing is that the shaman is making a buttload of money selling these things. But these statues, they wash up out of the lake, no one really knows where they come from, and no one seems to be questioning it. Except for the old diver. The old diver goes and explores the lake to try to figure out where these statues are coming from, and we find out that he sees unimaginable horrors that he's too scared to tell anyone about. So he locks himself in his cabin, and he isn't seen for days. The next time we see the shaman, he has a trademark around his name, which is actually pretty hilarious. We learn that the shaman has put every other souvenir and gift shop in the lake area out of business, selling his little statues. The mayor loves him, and the shaman has now bought a mansion and is living a rich man's lifestyle. The slides keep referring to the fact that he still has no idea what's going on. We're now introduced to a new character, the police officer. We learn that he joined the force in order to protect and serve his hometown, which he cared so much about. However, he's kind of learning that everyone in the system is corrupt, no one's really behaving as cops should, and this leads him to become disillusioned with the entire system, where it says he LARPs on 4chan about an upcoming, I'm not going to say that word for YouTube, but I'm just going to call it a big dance. We then get a mention that the police officer is good friends with the old diver, and he hasn't seen him in a while. We then go back to the mayor, who now has a question mark by his name, and his face is looking slightly more creepy. We learn that he does not make public appearances anymore, due to how creepy he is, and that he is absolutely rolling in tourism money. Now the slide really emphasizes that it is unsafe to look at the mayor for extended amounts of time. Volume 2 ends with a slide titled The Screams in the Forest, and it simply says, "They're getting louder, it's been days, something is coming." At this point in the story, we only know of two things being in the forest, and that is the hiker and the forest statue. So whatever this silhouette is in the picture, we're not really sure. I personally believe this to be the hiker, but that's for reasons that you'll have to find out on your own whenever you read Arc 2. Volume 3 starts off with a very disheveled looking shaman who we learn is kind of falling into this trap of drugs, and he's super drugged out all the time. And the mayor happens to be really good friends with him and pays him visits quite often. We then get this mildly unsettling picture of the mayor. So yeah, I'm just going to let that speak for itself. The next slide is of the old diver who hung himself, presumably because he went mad from what he saw in the lake. This leads us to the police officer, who was the first man on the scene in the old diver's cabin. You'll notice that on this slide it says ex-police officer, and this is because after he finds the old man in the cabin, he goes and busts the shaman for fentanyl, but he is fired with no explanation, and the shaman is let off with no reprimand. We then get this last slide that just says the lake, shows these two orbs, and has some pretty cryptic messaging talking about angels and children. These are names we haven't heard yet, but we will later. This just goes back to how well done this series is. It keeps you in the dark, and it kept me waiting for the next installment to be made. And as you can see from these slides, these are more than just like your average like meme generator meme. There was a lot of work that went into each of these slides, and I can't imagine how many hours of work the creator had to go to. Remember, that was med-induced posting. I highly encourage you to check him out. Alright, here we are, Volume 4. This is where everything hits the fan. This is where all the creepy subtleness kind of goes out the window, and we get the whole story and all of its horrific glory. This starts off with a slide titled The Blood Dawn. And it just says, "It's 4 a.m. Did you hear that?" And you see this shadowy, weird-looking, distorted figure. The next slide, we then see the full creature, and his name is Asgoth. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Essentially, this slide is just about how Asgoth used to beat the mayor, and he is now wreaking havoc on the entire lake area. And there's also this, which is hilarious. But again, you've got to read the story yourself because it's so good. The tourists, upon hearing the cries of Asgoth in the early morning, have now gone insane and are part of this one large hive mind and are eating everything, killing everybody, and destroying everything in sight. We now cut to the ex-cop, who is now fighting an armed insurrection against the people he once swore to protect. One thing I seriously love about this entire series is how it manages to put humor in all of it, no matter how disturbing or creepy things are getting, because this next part is actual comedy gold. His call to Boo Galoo on 4chan brought in 6 schizophrenics from out of state, all of which are now dead. Like this is incredible. We now find out that the shaman is practically dead and only given a sliver of consciousness by Asgoth himself, just enough for him to kill his girlfriend and housemate in the mansion, and for him to hate his own existence. This kind of is the tragic ending of the shaman's story. He never saw any of this coming, he only wanted to get rich, and now this is all that's left of him. Now some things will start to make sense from the very last slide of volume. Now some things are going to start making sense from the very last slide of volume 3. We now see the children of Uriel, who were formerly the little statues. Uriel is the name of the lake, and it states that they answered the angels' calls and are now about to go fight in the town. Presumably because of the language of this slide, they're about to go fight against the tourists as a good force, as a force for good. We now move on to volume 5. Now I want to talk about something about volume 5 really quick. From this point on, all of the Uriel files are short video clips with audio and like paste text that come up. So you have to watch every second of the video in order to reveal the full story. And oftentimes it's accompanied with some unsettling music. And honestly, at this point, I was like, this creator is going above and beyond for an Instagram like meme horror series, but because of it, it makes it fantastic. Anyway, moving on, we have The Quiet Dawn. It's just a picture, or it's just a video of the lake calmly going about its time. And this slide basically talks about it's as if nothing ever happened, everything is quiet now. We then get this shot that says Asgoth is now enclosed in the folds of the angel's arms. Now what this means at this point in the story, your guess is as good as mine. I believe it to be pretty straightforward. The angel came and it is there to protect the lake people. I could be very wrong. The angel could be a bad thing, but because of something that happens later on, I don't think so. But I'm not sure. I think the angel might be kind of like not really a good guy, not really a bad guy, but you know, not evil as Asgoth was. But anyway, that's not important right now. All we need to know is that Asgoth is trapped within the arms of the angel and at the bottom of the lake. Then we get all these security guards that have allegedly shown up out of nowhere and don't sleep, don't really talk to anybody, and everyone's just kind of doesn't know who they are or where they came from. We then learn of this character known as the superintendent, who seems to be this government official who's in charge of cleaning up the whole area and repurposing the site for whatever purposes the government has for it. We now have the construction worker, who is a new character but should look awfully familiar to you. He woke up out of nowhere and he woke up in an apartment out of nowhere, doesn't remember anything that happened before that. He got a call that he was late to his construction job site, and he sees security guards like loitering outside his apartment at all hours of the night. We then get this final slide that says end of arc 1 with this beam of light shooting up into the sky. That's all I'm going to cover for now. Essentially, this is broken up into like seasons. So that was season 1, and there's season 2, and it goes so far beyond all of what season 1 was that it's insane. That itself would be a full, like, probably hour and a half long video. However, I don't want to do that. I want you to experience the Uriel files for yourself. So from here on out, I will only be talking about what I liked about volume 1 and what I like about the series as a whole, and not any like crucial plot details. I'm going to tell you to go down to the description, click on the link to MedInduce Postings page, and find the Uriel files for yourself. What I love about this entire series is the slow burn into this final release in the last slide where everything just goes insane, and then I guess in the very final volume, it all just kind of goes back down again. So it's kind of like slow burn. What's going on? Oh my God, everything's happening at once. Back to nothing. Which is a phenomenal way of storytelling, especially with this format. This is something I haven't seen outside of this person's page, outside of Med-Induced Postings page. So that's why I was caught off guard when I first found it. I thought maybe this was a whole community that did things like this. It kind of, but not really. No one goes to the extent that Med-Induced Posting does. It's usually just one slide with a story to it or something like that. This creator's page is just littered with multi-paneled stories, and the Uriel Files is by far the most ambitious. It's more than just multi-panels. It's several posts, approximately 10 or 15. I could be wrong. That was just a number I pulled out of the air. Another thing I really love about this series, and I hit on during the video, is just how funny it is. It maintains that tongue-in-cheek aspect of like, okay, this is literally a meme format, and it's so funny at times, especially if you're in my corner of the internet and you understand certain like inside jokes. But anyway, yeah, that's the Uriel Files Season 1. I encourage you to check out the rest of it for yourself. So I'm going to get out of here and let you do that. Let me know if you eventually want me to cover the prelude or Volume 2 of the series. So I'm going to quit talking to myself. See you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching.